My next guest is an award-winning filmmaker with a career spanning more than 2 decades. He graduated from the University of Nsukka with a degree in theatre arts in 1990, after which he went on to study law in the University of Wolverhampton, where he graduated in 1998. He also completed a postgraduate degree in legal practice from London Metropolitan University in 2002. He is a member of the UK Directors Guild as well as the British Film Institute. A few of his films include The Mirror Boy, Last Flight to Abuja, Badamasi, Portrait of a General, and Blackmail. He's here to give us insight into his mind, along with sharing a bit of his vast wisdom and experience.
Wisdom? Wisdom? I don't have wisdom.
If you don't have wisdom, then we're in trouble. If you don't have wisdom, then who has wisdom in this country? Mr. Obi Emelonye, thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, take us back to the beginning. What was, your childhood like?
My childhood was great. It didn't start very well. I was born just before the start of the Civil War in 1967. So I was 3 months old when the war started, and
Wow.
my family moved from Port Harcourt, where I was born, to the village as part of the Osara, which is the running for your life in a war.
Yeah.
So the first 3 years of my life was abject poverty, need, strife, death, and all sorts of challenging situations. But I'm a survivor. I survived. I survived the war. Many of my mates did not. So after that very inauspicious start, anything that happened was
a bonus.
Was a bonus. So I had the support of a very large, very academically inclined family, and I went around the block a little bit, but eventually I found my calling, and since then I am happier, more contented, more fulfilled, and I have something that most people would not have in their lifetime, which is fulfillment.
When you talk about fulfillment, because usually it's like one or two things with people. It's either they find out one thing and then they stick to it, or for some people it takes them a lot of trial and error, keeping on to find things, and drop them and find and drop until they actually find what is right for them. Which one of those are you?
In my case, I took the scenic route. I took the long journey. So like you read in my introduction, I studied theatre arts at University of Nigeria Nsukka at a time when there was no career at the end of it. And then I went and played football for Rangers International Enugu and Julius Berger of Lagos before I went to the UK in the aim of playing football, because I was okay. I had skills. Anyway, so that was the plan, to go to the UK, play football, make quick money, and relax into some kind of ex-footballer retirement. But the plan wasn't working because I did not lie about my age, as most Nigerian players would do. So I discovered that it wasn't going to be a long career based on my real age. So I said, you know what? I tried to practice theatre arts in the UK and discovered that it was a lot of work without commensurate level of reward. So I decided, you know what? I needed a career that had transferable skills. I needed something that I could use at the moment to propel myself into some kind of comfort, so that when eventually I knew my life was going to be a creative life. That was for sure. So it was about where in the creative industry that I fit into. So while I was trying to find myself, which is a long journey for most people, for me it was definitely a long one. While I was trying to find myself, I needed a career that would give me a certain quality of life from which to spring to become who I want to be. And I felt law was it. It had transferable skills. The status as a lawyer would be something that you can carry into anything that you do in whatever sphere of life it is. And my twin brother was also a lawyer, so that was part of the draw. So I studied law, practiced law for a while. As I was doing that, I was beginning to discover filmmaking, because Nollywood was beginning to evolve as an industry. I saw people making films. Some of my classmates were involved in the industry, and I knew my level of talent vis-a-vis theirs. So I felt, okay, this is something I could do. I'm in a place where I had the advantage of technology and training of the type that they don't have. So I started teaching myself, growing gradually, till I shot my first film in 1999, then came back to Nigeria and joined the industry in 2000. And they had me for dinner. Everybody that I dealt with, all the marketers that time, the only thing that was remaining was my big head when I went back to London. so that was the journey, and eventually I discovered that this is something that I want to do. This is something that I have a calling for. It doesn't come easy. You have to make sacrifices. You have to do your youth service, as they say. But eventually, when you've done all of that, and you are on a straight road, it becomes easier. And I think that's where I am. It's a little bit of a slope, and I can, put the car in auto drive and relax, and that's what I'm doing.
That's interesting. You actually talked about a lot of things that I would like to unpack one by one, so we can actually get enough detail, as opposed to different things, because it touches about a lot of key factors in your life, one of them being law. And it's very interesting how basically from what I understand, your decision to practice law was from that of necessity, as opposed to actual, interest and love for law. Although, you had family members such as your brother that was very influential to that regard, but how does one make that pivot? Because I know in Nigeria, especially like during that time, theater arts was usually reserved for people that wanted to practice law but couldn't get into law. Theater arts was one of the degrees that they took. So for you to actually graduate with theater arts with that enthusiasm for drama and film in itself, and then now still go on to do law, on paper it actually looks like you would be someone that maybe, like, for whatever reason could not actually get into doing law directly, and then actually use study theater as a crutch. So on paper it's actually interesting, where like it's actually the reverse. You've actually been more interested in the film. Yeah. So what I want to hammer on, what I want for you to give us a lot more detail on is, when did your love for film first begin?
I think I would trace my love for creativity first, before I link it to film, because that is the progeny, that is the journey. So my dad, bless his soul, was a very creative person. He studied at the University of South London in the 50s, studied art and publicity. He came back, practiced with the many advertising agencies in Nigeria. He was a painter, he was a sculptor, very multi-talented artist. So I guess that's a little bit of creativity that came from him. And theater arts was a choice. It was actually a deliberate choice. Like you said, I was actually a science student, incidentally.
Wow.
and I said, you know what, I want to go and do something that I really, really enjoy. And I guess because my father was in that, industry, he allowed me. Most parents would have said, go and study medicine, go and study law, kind of thing. But he allowed me because I guess he knows the value of fulfillment instead of just chasing the dollar, as it were. So I studied theater arts. But when I went into theater arts, I didn't go into it with, as a 19-year-old, I didn't see myself, being a dramatist. But what I did discover was that I could write. And it was a gentleman called Obi Emelonye, bless his soul, he's late now, who discovered that in me. And he gave me the confidence to, when I started directing my classmates in projects, and all of a sudden I felt, wow, I'm not bad at this, And so When I went to London, I did a stage play, worked very hard on it, didn't make any money, and I realized, no, this is not the future. The future is on the screen, whether it is large screen or small screen. So I bought a camera and started teaching myself filmmaking. I bought a laptop and started editing. Everything self-taught. And to answer your question directly, I watched Indiana Jones, The Temple of Doom, as a young person in Jos, where my dad was living at the time. And it made a huge impression on me. It was my moment of
clarity.
I want to do this. Whoever told this story had me in their pocket from beginning till the end. I want to do that to people.
That was the movie.
That was in 1985, before I went to university. So from that point, I became interested in film. I started exploring film. I started watching Indian films without subtitles.
Wow!
But I could follow the story.
Wow.
It gives you a third eye so that you can discern narrative by just looking at people, looking at emotions, looking at how they react, looking at mannerisms. And that was it. The seed was sown. But that seed took a lot of sweat, tears, years to germinate. And it started germinating when I bought the camera, taught myself, came back and joined Nollywood, made some films, and I discovered that, okay, I'm playing in Nollywood amongst people who didn't have any training, were mainly traders, and what they were churning out wasn't to my liking, and I couldn't change the taste of the audience quickly. It was going to be a gradual process. So I said, you know what? They've had me for dinner. They've chopped my ears off and my balls off. Pardon my French. But I was going to come back. And The Mirror Boy became my comeback film.
Do you care to elaborate on, the balls being chopped off? Because I have a clear idea of what you're saying, like living in this country, just daily life in this country is a battle, so I can imagine the mistake that a lot of people make, especially people that have lived abroad. Obviously, you grew up here and you have your roots here, but it's almost like once you go abroad and then you're out of touch for a while and then you come back,
you're cheap fodder.
You're chicken.
You are cheap fodder.
You are rice and chicken. So I can imagine, especially like in an industry like Nollywood at the time, things are definitely a lot more sophisticated now. But in the 90s, 2000s, basically the home video era, that was when, Nollywood actually, if we want to talk about the modern Nollywood as we know it today, that was when a lot of its origins were. And I can imagine that it was the wild, wild west during that.
It was the wild, wild east, honest. It was horrible. It was horrible because the structure of the business is so steeped in their favor. So you make a film with your money. You produce a master copy of the film. You give it to them. They would give you a contract or a piece of paper that says for each one they sell, they give you 200 naira for argument's sake. And they went and produced the thing with their manufacturer who would duplicate the DVDs and tell you we produced 10,000 for argument's sake. Meanwhile, they produce 50,000. And they will take your 10,000, which you have to, so your only accounting tool is to give them the jackets, the cover for the sleeves for the DVD or the VHS, whichever it is.
Yeah.
And that's your only accounting tool. So they give you give them 10,000 sleeves and they will pack it in their store, go and print theirs from another printer or from the same printer for that matter, and they're selling. The day you come back to get accounts, they will say, no, neighbor, cow 4,000, cow 2,000. So I ain't they go 1,000. Meanwhile, they've sold 100,000, if you know what I mean. So it was a really inappropriate business structure that is steeped in their favor, and they exploited it to the hilt. At that time, I went to Dumota and locked people's shops. So I would go and buy a big padlock. I'll go to their shops, drag them out, or sometimes lock them inside the shop with the padlock, and the whole of the Dumota will gather and beg me. That's how people knew me at that time, because I got so frustrated. Why is it difficult for somebody to deliver some kind of truth you have a conversation, you shake hands to it, you sign a contract to it, and then the person doesn't deliver? No explanation. They just, from ab initio, they want to rip you off. Who does that? They will chop capital, chop profit.
Nigerians
How
do
come?
that. Nigerians
And
do that.
a very naive, young, British touched man that I came back, I just couldn't handle it. I just couldn't understand why it was difficult to get people to do what they swore that they would do. So I lasted 1 year of frustration, 1 year of real disappointment, and I went away. I went away and said, you know what, I'm coming back. I'm not running. Sometimes you have to retreat and live another day so that you can fight another day. And that's it. I came back, and my comeback film became The Mirror Boy. By that time, it was a different industry. It was more technical. It was more cinematic, and more fitted into my idea of film. Not all those the uncle maltreats him and then he goes to the Lagos and he becomes rich and he comes back, and I wasn't cut out to tell that kind of story. I was kind of a more international stories based on local content, but with international, palette. And I think the industry now suited me to the T, because it was more what they call hyper local, because the content and the locations are local, but also it was more adaptable, more palatable to a Western international audience, which is why Last Flight to Abuja is one of the most watched films on Netflix, even though it was made, 11 years ago?
We'll get to that. I can definitely see how triggered you are when you talk about your frustrations with the Nigerian movie industry at the time, particularly the promoters. It's something that a lot of people went through, and I think a lot of people say that the industry is a lot better for it nowadays. So getting to The Mirror Boy, because I believe The Mirror Boy was the movie that first got your foot in the door. If we're talking about kicking the door down, with full force, like The Mirror Boy was definitely that movie for you. I remember I actually saw The Mirror Boy at the time, in 2011. Yes, I did. I found it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But I found it very interesting. Like, from my own personal point of view, I found it very interesting because I didn't really expect the twist at the end, because it's one of those things where if you watch the movie again, it kind of makes a lot of sense, but you don't necessarily pick on it until the twist actually happens. But two things that I want to pick on. Number one, from what you said about your experience with the Nigerian film industry, was your decision to make The Mirror Boy primarily based in the UK, coming back to Africa, was that more because you did not want to deal with Nigerians, or because of the convenience of the location? That's the first question. And then the second question is, why the Gambia as opposed to Nigeria? Because was it also because of dealing with Nigerians that made you choose the Gambia as a
first question,
as a location?
So by the time I was making The Mirror Boy, I had spent I had spent 18 years in the UK.
Okay.
So I'd become a hybrid African-British guy. And I wasn't really completely cut out. I wasn't thinking exactly like my colleagues in Nollywood. Even though there was a general acceptance of me as one of them, but my mindset was slightly different. My worldview was slightly different. And just like in research, if you want to write a thesis, you have to find a gap in the academy to address. So I looked at the industry. I had to find a gap, and that gap was something that I felt would be, it's a kind of stories that haven't been told. Nollywood doesn't tell stories from the point of view of a younger person. It's usually an adult perspective. So I said I wanted to tell a story that had the perspective of a 12-year-old. And the 12-year-old is the star of the film, as opposed to adults doing that. That was a completely business decision. And I was, I wanted to take advantage of the fact that I lived in the UK and I had this solid Africanness about me. So it became a spiritual, almost traditional religion spirituality, not Catholic or Muslim modern religions and spirituality, our ancient religion spirituality, which I kind of, sugar-coated in such a way that it became a simple story that people could relate to. And Christians, incidentally, my executive producer was a pastor, essentially supporting a pagan film, but it doesn't come across that way. So I fused my Britishness and my Africanness and say, how best do I portray these two ideas? So the stories that I tell from that point always have an African angle and a UK angle. So I needed an African angle, and I was intent on coming to the second question, filming it, the African side in Nigeria, obviously where I have a relative advantage because I'm from here, I know people from here. I wanted to shoot it in Obudu Ranch. So I met the Commissioner for Tourism and Cross River State in London at an expo, and they spoke very highly and invited me, come, we'll support you, blah, 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 you shoot, blah, 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 blah. I
feel like I know where this is going.
I packed up my bags, came to Reki, landed in Cross River State. I didn't know that Obudu Ranch was like 1 year's drive from there. Very decrepit road, very bad, dangerous roads in very poor state of repair. I made the trip to Obudu. First of all, the lady said, go and see Obudu and then come back and we'll talk. So I went to Obudu Ranch, and he had everything that we wanted. He had hills, he had streams, he had forest, he had plain lands, he had, beautiful place. I said, wow, okay, we can do this. So I came back to Calabar, went to meet the commissioner, and they said they can't help, that they could have given me a vehicle to take me to Obudu. That's the production. But, they promised accommodation. No, the accommodation is no longer available, blah, blah, blah. Essentially nothing, no support whatsoever. So I checked it. I would bring a crew back from London, take some actors from Nigeria here, instead of shooting in Lagos or Abuja where I have control, where I have things at my beck and call. I would transport everybody to Calabar. From Calabar, put them on the road to this dangerous trip for what? No support whatsoever. So by this time there was a young lady in London who had cast in one of the roles. She was from Gambia and Sierra Leone. So her mom is from Gambia and her father is from Sierra Leone. Her name is Fatima Jabe. So as I was in Nigeria coming back from, I was at the airport, Fatima calls me and said, when are we shooting? I said, that shooting is not going to happen soon because I have to find a location. This place is nice, but it's not going to work. And she said, why don't you come to Gambia? I said, I'm waiting. They only sell granuts there. What do they know about films? He said, hold on, she will call me back. So I was still waiting at the airport. The phone now rings, and I pick my phone. And there's a soft voice, almost effeminate voice, came on the phone. She said, Fatima said, hold on, and passed the phone on to somebody. And he said, hello, Mr. Nigeria. I said, Nigeria man. He calls me Nigeria man. Hello, Nigeria man. I said, hello, sir. Who am I speaking with? And he said, my name is Yaya Jame. Yaya as in the president? Oh, you don't believe me? Oh, Fatima, take your phone. No, I believe you, sir. I believe you, sir. That was it. I was speaking to the president.
Wow.
Fatima had a proximity with the president and begged him to support the project. He said, look, you guys should come. We don't have money, but we'll give you accommodation, license to shoot anywhere. We'll provide you army, soldier, security, vehicles, whatever you need, but no cash, but whatever else you need.
Wow.
I said, wow, I don't believe this. Let me go see for myself. As I landed in Gambia, from the tarmac, they brought their masquerade. That it was like a state visit. They celebrated me, and I said, wow, now this is what we're talking about. They took me around a place called Makasutu where we shot the film. It was like a tourist resort. Everything was perfect. I said, you know what, crew, let's come. And that's how Gambia happened. And it was, I would say, one of the most conducive production environments that I faced as a filmmaker, because we had everything, state level, national level. It's not, If we're driving down the road and we see a nice place and we say, let's stop and shoot here, we'll just stop. The soldiers will block the road and we'll shoot there. It was great. That's it.
There's one recurring theme here, there's one recurring theme, and it's always how working in Nigeria there's always a negative angle to working in Nigeria, having to work with people in Nigeria, and I feel like it's way worse, especially when you now don't have your boots on the ground, because I think there's a certain level of relatability that is missing, even though you're still Nigerian, but I think a lot of the times it's not because of the fact that you're Nigerian, it's because maybe that relatability is not there. All their head is thinking is they have money, this guy has money, let me see how much I can get from this guy, and it's more about that. I feel like here people are very, very short-sighted because of how the country is, the situation of living. So most people think about just getting what they need to get from the person. Then if they are
Get it now.
if they are even going to give you what they say they are going to give you in terms of maybe a good or a service, a transaction, like they shall collect their own from you first, before you now start talking about whether or not they are going to do what they said they would do in the first place. Things are a lot better.
Let me add, incidentally, Fatima Jabe, the lady that took me to Gambia, is now the first lady of Sierra Leone.
Wow. How did that come about? Is there any production that you thought you could have done better in?
Oh. There is only the pursuit of perfection. Perfection doesn't exist. So you are chasing this utopia of having everything the way you planned it. Never happens. So if you are given an opportunity to repeat a project, you do it differently, 99.9% of the time. But I don't look back in regret. I don't look back and say, oh, that film that I shot in 2011, I should have used that actor, I should have done this, I should have done that. That was who I was at the time. Whatever I've learned from it, I apply it to the next project, and that's how you grow organically. And I look at everything that has happened in the past and I bless God for it, because it's the journey that brought me here. If I didn't make those turns, if I didn't make those mistakes, I wouldn't be here today. I might, it's serendipity. Another door opens and it's a completely different life. So whatever has happened, I feel is ordained. And even though they're not completely perfect, I believe that, nobody is, no situation is perfect. So you get from it what you get from it. You get the experience and you add it to the ones that you have going forward and you better yourself. So I like to do incrementally better projects as opposed to going back and worrying what I did or did not do in the previous one.
So it's always about
the next project.
The next project and the next
future
project.
Yes.
So it's basically learning as you go.
We are all students of life, and learning doesn't stop. I'm doing a PhD, finishing in December. I'm doing it rather belatedly, but I just felt if you stop learning, you start rotting. So,
is your PhD
in film?
In film, wow. Can you do that after having such discipline in one particular field and then doing a PhD in something completely different?
I studied law, did what is called a postgraduate certificate in legal practice, which is like bar exam or solicitor, to be a solicitor in the UK, and I practiced for about 3 years. So that is the whole of my law career. It gives me, like I said, the experience, the astuteness of a lawyer, the ability to interpret contracts like nobody else in the industry who's not a lawyer, and it's something that I take into my practice as a filmmaker. But I would say that my first degree was in theater arts, and my experience alone could have allowed me to do a PhD even if I didn't have a first degree before. But your first degree on all the degrees, including the masters that you have, show that you can embark on a research, which is what I'm doing. So my research degree is predicated on my cumulative academic experience and qualifications, and like I said, I could have been offered a PhD based on my level of experience, which they can equate to at least a master's degree. But I don't have a master's degree in theater, but I'm allowed to do, or in film, but I'm allowed to do a PhD in film, because I have shown that I have a very robust academic background, and I'm able to do the work that is required for a PhD level qualification, and that's what it is. So, you know, I'm also teaching. I'm a lecturer in filmmaking at the University of Huddersfield, which at the time that I got the offer, I wasn't looking for a job. But when the offer was made to me, because they were headhunting me, I looked at it as something that was beyond me, because I wasn't being approached because I was a British filmmaker. I was being approached based on Mirror Boy and Last Flight Abuja and all those films that I made for Nollywood.
Yeah.
So I felt it was my industry that was being recognized here, and it transcended me. So even though I didn't want the job, I wasn't looking for a job, what I did was to accept it, because with it, it would be some kind of validation, some kind of acceptance of the Nollywood School of Thought in filmmaking, if I'm now teaching that same school of thought in a UK university.
Would you ever consider being a lecturer in a Nigerian university?
Hell no. Hell no. It's not gonna happen. No, I couldn't live with it. I could be a visiting guy, somebody that, you know, as part of imparting to other people and sharing my experience and my knowledge, I could come for a week, do something and disappear. But to work as a full-time lecturer in Nigerian university,
No, you can't do it.
Let's see what happens in the next few years, maybe the next 15 years, if we're still here.
Oh my God, my country, my people. The scars are very, very deep. You know, is there any project you will label as your favorite, or can you give me like 3 projects in particular that stand out to you?
It's like asking a father like myself. I have 3 children. It's like asking me who's your favorite child.
Yeah,
I don't have favorite children. My mom is in the house here. She taught me not to have. You know, she had 8 of us.
wow.
But you couldn't tell who's her favorite. She was that egalitarian, that fair, and it's something that I learned, and I practice it with my children. And also, I think you can take it into my film, because you don't love one child over another. I don't love one project over another. They would have their strengths. One child might be academic, the other might be loving, the other might be sporty. You appreciate them for who they are, and you accept them wholeheartedly for what they represent. But having said that, I feel the films that established me as this guy that you're talking to right now are, one, The Mirror Boy, which I call my epiphany. It's the opening salvo that said, this guy is here. Because AMVCA nominations had just been announced, and we got 4 nominations for my film, The Blackmail. 4 nominations, including Best Director. But rewind to 2013, when the first AMVCA happened. My film, The Mirror Boy, had 14 nominations.
Wow.
So 10 years down the line, I'm still being nominated in stuff like this. It shows longevity. It shows that I'm still growing. It shows that I'm still learning. So The Mirror Boy was that project that kicked open that door and allowed the world to notice this British Nigerian who is telling African stories in a different way. And I would say it looked, you know, when something happens once, it looks like an accident. If you repeat it twice, then it looks like there's a method in the madness. Last Flight Abuja was the next film after The Mirror Boy. Completely different genre, completely different style. And the success of that, critical and commercial success of that, really, really embedded my presence in the industry. So it wasn't a mistake anymore. I wasn't a one-trick pony. I wasn't a one-hit wonder. And those 2 films gave me the foundation to now be who I am. Be able to tell different stories in a way that I feel would connect to the audience and earned the trust of the people who watch films and the people who give awards. Somebody was telling me the other day I'm officially the most awarded filmmaker in contemporary African cinema. And he had proof. and this is not anybody. This is somebody who's been called the ambassador of African cinema, Mr. Michael Ajere. So he has proof that I'm the most awarded of all filmmakers in contemporary African cinema, and it's it's something that is humbling, but I can see why that is. I've been consistent, I've been persistent, I've been enterprising, I've been resilient, I've been crazy, I've been a risk taker, I've believed, I've been optimistic, I've hoped, I've worked. And if you play football, you lick orange.
One thing I find interesting, to me it's not surprised how you've gotten so many awards over the years, and in particular it's because when you look at your catalog, nearly every single film, it's in a genre of its own or a sub-genre of its own. It's like it shows the level of versatility that you have, from going from a movie like The Mirror Boy, very, very self-contained, story that was straight to the point, you could follow it from A to Z, and then now jumping from that to a film like, Last Flight to Abuja, where you have an all-star cast, you're telling different stories at once, and then you now have a meeting point, and then at the meeting point, that's when the chaos ensues, so having, that range, it's very easy. And also, like, when you have the range, it's one thing to have the range, but then also the level of execution as well. To your own words, Last Flight of Abuja being one of the most watched films, Nollywood films on Netflix, whereas it came out 10 years ago now. So it speaks to the level of intentionality that you put behind your work, so being like the most awarded, I don't think that is far-fetched, if I could say that. I
have proof, but that's what he said.
I mean, like, the person said that they have proof.
In South Africa, that's where it was determined.
It didn't happen in Nigeria.
It was at the conference that they determined that. So, I mentioned the guy's name so that people will understand that I'm not just making that up. But, awards are just recognition of the effort. So we've been nominated for Best Director for Black Male in the AMVCA that is happening on the 20th of May this year. Win, lose or draw, the fact that of the thousands of filmmakers in this country, you are named among the first eight directors based on the project that you've made, it's an endorsement. You're a winner already. And the fact that I have 4 AMVCAs at home, from dating back from 2013 up till now, means that I haven't lost it. And sometimes you doubt yourself. Sometimes things are not going very well because the sun has turned around and is facing the east and you are in the west. But you continue to do what you're doing. The sun will come around again and shine on you. And that's the lesson for everybody, because there comes a time as an actor, as a filmmaker, when you are not the toast of the moment. Chidi Mokeme was essentially a forgotten man until he did Shantytown. And all of a sudden, everybody's screaming and shouting. He's nominated for Best Actor, AMVCA. Yeah. That's what happens.
Like, Chidi Mokeme was a superstar when I was a child.
Absolutely.
A long ass time ago. We're talking about it 20-something.
All he has to do is just keep doing what he's doing. The sun will come around again and he'll be fine. And that's the lesson for everybody. Even myself, with the level of success that I've achieved, there will be times when the focus will be on other people. Don't begrudge them. Don't envy them. Encourage them. Congratulate them. Keep working hard and wait your time. Every dog has its day.
Every dog has its day, indeed. I'm going to, using one interesting thing that I found from Last Fight to Abuja was the classic feel it had to it. I think, if I remember correctly, the ratio of the film was, the classic ratio, I think 2.2:3.5. And one thing that was also interesting was the color grade that you used like a classic yellowish grade on it. So
you be expert too.
So the question I have for you, because earlier in the interview you mentioned that you also edit as well as, you taught yourself film, you taught yourself script writing, you taught yourself all these things, and then editing as well. And people really underestimate how much of a film is basically in editing. So First of all, I would like for you to, at least in your own words, elaborate the importance of having a great edit. And then secondly, how does color grading in particular, affect, your vision as opposed to what the audience is going to see?
So editing, I think the industry needs to recalibrate the value given to different roles in the industry, because editing should be up there with the directors.
Yeah.
Really. Because the film is cut in the studio. It's made in post. The editor is the only person that has the ability, the tools, and the capability to make corrections in the story, in the script, with the acting, with the cinematography, with the directing, and it's the last stop of the storytelling. Storytelling is in 3 phases: the script, the production, and edit. And it's actually the most important part of the storytelling, because that is where everything comes together. But unfortunately, because of the hierarchy in the industry in terms of Hollywood, editors are seen as people that you lock away in a dark room and they do their thing and the director will take credit for everything. I don't think so. So my editing is not the best in the world, and what I do with my films is to do the first cut of the film, to say, this is what I plan to do with the shots that I've taken here. You guys make it better. Having said that, I have completely edited films. Badamasi, the film with Babangida that is on Amazon Prime, nobody else touched the edit. I edited it from beginning till the end. Crazy Lovely Cool that is on Netflix, the TV series, 10 episodes TV series that is on Netflix, I edited that. Heart and Soul that is on Netflix, I edited that. Nobody touched it. But it is not my forte. I'm slow, but because I understand what I want and I'm not an expert at it, I end up getting there, but it takes me time. So it becomes a chore for me. So if I can avoid it, I don't do it. But editing is absolutely important, because that's where the story is told. And I think editors should take more pride in the work they do, and hopefully, as people recognize Steven Spielberg, when he was accepting a nomination or an award recently, mentioned production assistants and crew members that nobody remembers in his acceptance speech, because those are the people that do the work that make the film, not the guys who are going to sit in a air-conditioned room and do stuff. So editing is absolutely important, and I teach editing at University of Huddersfield, and I see how students begin to grasp. So I haven't made a film since I started teaching in Huddersfield. My next film is going to benefit from a different perspective of filmmaking, because I see things from a slightly different perspective. No longer from the point of view of the maker of the film, but because I had to teach people the same skill, I now understand the theory that has also improved my practice. So editing is super key. The next color grade. Editing, the final stage of editing is to grade. Especially when you shoot with certain cameras on certain settings, whether it is log, it's called log sometimes, or raw for some cameras. If you shoot raw, it means that your monitor will give you, especially if you put what's it called?
A lens.
A look. It's called. There's a technical word for it which escapes me now. If you put a look on it, it gives you what you think you've shot. But the actual footage, when they're stored in the drive, would be almost black and white.
Wow.
So what you have to do is when you finish your editing, you cut it as almost black and white. But when you finish, you do what is called a color grade. And there are 2 types of color grades. The easy type of color grade is to essentially make the picture pop. So you make the whites white and the blacks black, and all the other colors in between will just pop. It will look almost, you can reach out and touch it. So your nearly black and white footage would automatically look like a music video, a Nigerian music video, which they oversaturate anyway sometimes. But there's also something called narrative grading. The narrative grade is you are telling a story with the color. So like in the case of Last Flight Abuja, most Hollywood films use the teal, which is some kind of blue stroke orange. So teal stroke orange, because they are the the opposite ends of the color spectrum, they are the most contrast you can get. So the sky is the orange, or the skin of the actor, in the case of Caucasian actors, is the orange, and the blue is the night. So if you watch every Hollywood blockbuster film, there's that teal and orange look that is very contrasty and very sharp. That has become the Hollywood look. So I implemented that in Last Flight to Abuja, which incidentally I didn't do the grade. A young man did the grade in London. This once again, he's never graded a film before. I trusted him because he had the basic skill, and we worked on it together. So grading is another important way of telling the story, making the pictures pop, increasing the production value of the project, but most importantly, being able to decipher, in a subtle way, enhance the narrative of the film. For argument's sake, in Badamasi, the film starts almost black and white because it started in 1967 during the Civil War, when Babangida was shot in the tummy. And then as it progressed, by the time it got to 1993 when he left, it was almost full color. So there's a gradient of color increasingly getting brighter with the closer it gets to the modern times, the brighter it was. And that was deliberate, So grading is every tool in the hands of an editor is to enhance the story. Whether, sound design, which is something that I've become very obsessed with, which is why Blackmail was nominated for sound design at the present AMVCAs, and music. I have a composer in America who I've never met before who works on my films. He was also nominated. So these are the things that enhance the film. So it's not just shooting a good film. There are people who work in the background who will not get all the glory, but who actually make the film successful. The editor is one of them, one of the most important of them.
Yeah, I agree with you in particular about the sound design, because even for me, like, I think, first of all, I don't really watch a lot of Nigerian movies. Obviously, you have like the story, the same story being told over and over again over the same coat of paint over the course of 20 years. So it's almost like as the trends change, the stories adjust to the trends, as opposed to the stories changing with the trends. So it's still the same rich man, poor man, it's still the same, wife, husband, it's still the same family matters and stuff like that, that you usually see in contemporary Nollywood movies, especially the stuff that is usually shown on TV. For cinema, the cinema movies now we're in an era where we're having like the emergence of a blockbuster type of dish, in Nollywood, which is very good because you can at least see people trying to break from the norm. I don't think, at least for most of the movies that have come out on the big screen, they've all been different from what you would see in contemporary Nollywood movies. But a big problem I have personally is sound design. Like, sometimes I wonder whether the people are listening to what they're listening to. Like,
that's where their head rich, that's where their brain rich. That's all it is.
I don't want to. Because a good example for that for me was King of Boys. Like, King of Boys, I liked the movie, I liked the story. Just based, if I'm looking at the story, with everything, you feel like things can be done better. But I actually honestly enjoyed the story for King of Boys. But what threw me out of the loop was the sound, and especially the song choices in some key moments of the movie, and it throws you off, because there's a certain feeling that you get from a scene. And the best way to translate that feeling, especially when there's no dialogue, is the sound. Yeah. So, and especially for me, like, I'm someone that likes music. I listen to a lot of music, and I know how to translate feeling through music. So, like, it's very easy at the same time to also be thrown off by said music. So it's very interesting how you pointed out sound design. I also agree that it's very important. And to also hammer on what you said about experiences from teaching people. Like, it lays credence to the saying that the best way to learn is to teach. Yeah. So it's also interesting as well that you mentioned that as well. So getting back to,
we're losing daylight.
Yes, we're losing, but at least it's still bright on the camera, so we thank God. Okay. We'll wrap up shortly. So, over the course of your career, you've had, like, in all of your movies, you usually work with a lot of Nollywood stars. Obviously you have your frustrations with Nollywood, as you've said so on previous occasions. You have your frustrations, but because of obviously, you're inherently Nigerian, you consider yourself a Hollywood director. So you do work with these Nigerian stars, like they have these personalities. I know like celebrity culture in Nigeria is very big, everybody's, do you know who I am? Everybody's a big man, everybody's a big woman. So as a director, how do you bring these people to leave their egos at the door and actually buy into a script and actually come to make a movie?
I think the best way to convince anybody is to show that, one, you're passionate, two, you are informed, so you have content, and three, that you respect them and you respect yourself. If you have these four things, essentially, you'll be fine with anybody, no matter how much of an ego they have or how much of a diva they are. I guess the first of the big stars that I worked with was Genevieve, but and I would say that she was gracious enough to give me a chance. Most people would have said, "Who's this guy? I beg." But she read the script, and by reading the script, all of a sudden she said, "This is nice. This is actually very nice. Let's talk." And from that point, she said, "You wrote the script?" I said, "Yes." I said, "Wow." There's respect, mutual respect. So even when we're on set and she has alternative ideas to what I have, you see, half of directing is people management. You have all sorts of people on your set, and if it's an ego trip of you rubbing, let's check who's taller or who has a stronger will, you ruin your project. Mm-hmm. They become perfunctory for you and they will not perform. It's about that respect, and that respect comes from, I demand my respect, but I also respect you in return. So if we need to have a conversation, I'll take her aside and we'll have a conversation, disagree, but I tell her, look, okay, you know what, for this one, I'll shoot it the way I want, and I'll also shoot yours, so that we have the two options. How about that? We'll come back, she obeys everything I say in front of everybody, and we are fine. So once you give them that respect, it's not a case of shutting them down. Oh, forget, I'm the director, shut up. And you're looking for trouble. So it is. I think the best way to handle people is to show that you know what you're talking about, to show that you are passionate about what you're not going to be smoking and looking away, and somebody will call your attention and you say, oh, where were we? No. Then you need to be committed to the work. If you're committed, they'll commit with you, and if they know, they'll listen to you. And the only way to show them that is to have a conversation with them, convince them about your ideas, because there are 1,000 ways of telling a story. But this is my way of telling it, and it works. So if you're telling this story, you could tell it another way. That's fine. But this is my story. I'm the director. And it's what I'm doing is not wrong. So I could do what you're doing, what you're saying, what you're suggesting, not because it is better than mine, but it's just to pander you, to humor you. So you could do that. They have some ideas. So why don't we drive out this way instead of this way? And you look at it, it doesn't change the dynamics of the story you're telling. You say, you know what? Why not? Let's do that. Drive out this way instead of that way. You humor them. They try to push it again. You say, okay, I've taken your advice the last time. Let's do it this way now. I listen to you, but let's do it this way now. So they know you listen. They know you're not shutting everybody down because you think you are better than anybody or you know better than everybody else. You respect them. If there's a conversation to be had, you take them away and have that conversation. And you'll be fine.
Okay. Great response. I agree with that. Badamasi is very, very interesting. You're already laughing. One of the things, Badamasi, I wanted to watch it, but I couldn't. I didn't really have enough time in my preparation. But from getting to know your discography, I was very surprised that you even had a movie like that in your catalog in the first place. And the reason being is we don't really have, besides maybe in recent memory, Half of a Yellow Sun, which was more of a period piece. It's still more fiction, but it's more of like the only films where you can say like we have like an actual period piece, so having not just a period piece but also a biopic as well, and not just a biopic about a former, and not just a former Edo State IB, so like how that's the question is how
in 2004 15, I made a film called Oxford Gardens in collaboration with Africa Magic. But by this time, the landscape of the industry was beginning to change. AY had come on board with his big comedy shows that are on the screen. Mo Abudu had come on board with 50 and was working on big projects. Kunle was upping his game. Everybody was upping their game. It was a case of either having the money to compete with them on that level or to look for a niche as a filmmaker that would give you fulfillment, that would stand you out, so that by the mere mention of the name alone, all your publicity is done for you. So I've always been interested since watching Nelson Mandela with Idris Elba, which I thought was not a great film. But I felt that there are several characters in our history that deserve treatment in a biopic. And Babangida was, topped the list. The kind of intrigue, the kind of political chicanery that happened under him. He's kind of very dynamic, very suave, very, what's the word? Controversial character. His 8 years of very stylistic military rule. And June 12th.
Yeah.
Who could say no to that as a storyteller? So I felt it had every ingredient of a very interesting biopic. But now the question was, do I do it like most of my colleagues, which is, jumble a few stories together based on newspaper cuttings and internet searches and tell the story and call it the stubborn grasshopper or something like that? Or do I do this in a kind of authorized, with the consent, participation, and authority of the subject? And I said, look, I have to do it the right way. But I didn't have any access to him. In 1990, when I was in final year at Nsukka, he gave me an award, a Nigerian National Youth Award, that happened in Lagos. And he handed the award personally to me and a group of other people that did that. So I have photographs from that. So eventually I found somebody who had access to him, and they took me to Minna. And the idea was to meet him for a few minutes and explain what I was about to do. So I came in, they said, your 2 seconds starts now. And I said, he said, Obi, are you Obi or Obi? I said, it's Obi. He said, okay. You are from Imo State? I said, yes, I'm from Imo State. He said, okay. And I hear you make films. I said, yes, I make films. He said, okay. You live in London? I said, I live in London, yes. He said, I've met you before. You gave me an award. He said, which award? I said, Nigerian National Youth Award in 1990. Have proof. Here's the proof. Yes, you and I shaking hands. And his face lit up. He said, that's Mrs. She's late now. That's Mr. That's Ambassador. The people in the... She started naming everybody. His face just lit up. My 15 seconds turned to 2 hours.
Wow.
It was a case of, okay, tell me about, what do you do? What films did you make? I said, I made a film called The Mirror Boy. He said, Mirror, what? I said, The Mirror Boy. He said, I've seen it 3 times. I said, Oga, not lie. I said, wallahi, Oga, not lie. This is literally what I said. I said, it's a lie. He said, isn't it Genevieve and the small Osita? I said, you see what I'm saying? You've written books. Nigerians will come to the lunch, take the book, put it on their shelf, and that's it. Nobody will read it. But me, village man from Imo State, that's South local government area, is able to reach you. Is able to reach into your living room and tell you the story of The Mirror Boy. And you've watched it 3 times. Imagine how many people you will reach by making your story into film. So you've kept quiet for a long time. You've allowed people to use conjecture and rumors to fill in the gap. As life is staring you in the face, as you're getting older, maybe this is the time for you to open up. Do a mea culpa and say, this is what happened on my watch. Apologize if you like, but tell the truth. Come back next month. I went to London, came back again. The date. He would speak to me I would wait. When I come, I wait. 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. He'll say, oh, you're still here. Okay, come see me. I'll come. He said, okay, I need to speak to somebody. I need to take some more books, read, come back in 2 months' time. In 2 months' time, I came back. That was his way of releasing people. He tells you to go and come back. People go and not come back. Me? For where? I kept every appointment until it got to the point where he said, you know what? Your persistence is something else. I've never seen somebody like you, apart from the guy that wrote his autobiography, Nduka Agbese, I think, that wrote this. He said, we are the 2 people that have bothered him the most. Persisted. When he says, go, come back, we go, come back. For that reason, he's going to do this. So he sat down with his son, Mohammed, and no holds barred. Any question I wanted, I asked. Delegiwa, Letterbomb, Maman Vatsa, Okaku, Biafran War, Buhari, Abacha. And the one he forgets, his son would say, I took notes, went back, wrote the script, now started looking for money. So, incidentally, the film was not allowed to be released in Nigeria.
Wow, really?
We wanted to open in the cinemas. They refused to give us censor board classification. We wanted to release on Netflix. They refused to allow it on Netflix. Amazon took a gamble on the film to show it on Amazon Prime. That's how you know, in terms of media culture and maturity, how immature we are as a media culture. Because, you know, this is an authorized biography by somebody who was at the center of some of these things. I don't need anybody else's permission. And if he agrees to me doing it, then say it. If there's a rejoinder, if you think he's told it from a perspective that is not fair, and Abacha wants to do a rejoinder, let them do a rejoinder. Let them make another film. Let give somebody else a job. And we continue to say that. And somewhere in the middle of all of these conversations is the truth. Not what I'm saying, not what I've presented. What I've presented is a subjective view of Babangida. But that starts the conversation. It's on Amazon. A lot of people have watched it. They've been staggered by the level of revelations that, and if you look at what happened in the last election and what was happening in 1993, when Abiola purportedly won the election, you see that where rain start to beat us, no be here.
Nothing changes in this country. It's very interesting. I actually didn't know that you met him. You know, it's not something that you can really find on, you know, online, you know. But
I actually have a very personal relationship with him. He calls me on New Year's Day to say Happy New Year. That's how close we are.
Wow.
Some people, he said he's giving me money. He didn't give me any money. He didn't give me any money to tell his story, to lie about him. That's what the Yoruba world was saying, that I collected money to whitewash his image. I've never hidden the fact that this is his perspective. This is an authorized biography from him, from his point of view, of something that we all know about historically. And he has a right to say his side of the story. And it's for somebody else to do a rejoinder, make another film from Abacha perspective, and then from Abiola perspective. The more the merrier. Yeah.
But your own was to open the door.
Yeah.
Why do you think more filmmakers, especially Nigerian filmmakers, don't take this approach? It seems like a lot of people are aware. It seems like we're so comfortable. I don't know whether it's being comfortable in our ignorance or comfortable in our trends, but we're very, very averse to change, you know, in this country. So, you know, the more things change, really in Nigeria, the more things change, the more things stay the same, you know. So especially like, you know, recently in our political atmosphere and things like that, you know, people are crying and complaining, you know, and there's a lot of fire coming from, you know, the youth movement, you know, from a lot of young Nigerians right now. But for someone like me that actually knows the history of Nigeria and actually like done my research and going to read about these things, you know, to your point, you know, these things are not really new. People are saying that this is the worst election we've had. But if you're saying that this is the worst election that we've had, then it means that you don't know anything about all the elections that have, exactly. Yeah. You know, so it's very, you know, we're in very, very interesting times in Nigeria, and I feel like one of the things that can actually shine light on these issues is if they actually presented to the Nigerian movie people in forms of movies and series.
Based on my experience, a lot of people will not be chomping at the bit to go and tell a historical story, because if you are working in an environment where an international streamer, in quote, would ask you to go and get a letter from the government before they release your film, if even they cannot release a film like that, then it beggars the question, who can? Is it the cinema guy who's Lone Ranger, sole trader, showing some films to feed his family, that would take the risk? So, you know, people are afraid of repercussions. People are afraid of being caught in a political web, like I was caught in a political web. The film was finished in 2019. It didn't get on Amazon until last year.
Wow.
In that time, it only showed in London. So it's something that frightens people, especially of the political nature. So if you're doing a biopic on a businessman, Dangote, for argument's sake, it could maybe not you're not going to be stepping on 1,000 toes. But if you're doing a biopic on Gowon, or you do a biopic on Ojukwu, somebody will say you're taking sides. And unfortunately, that's where we are. I guess in the future, when we become more media enlightened, it will be easier to do these things. And hopefully, there will be a distance between the period when it happened and the period when it's being shown. Because that's also important, to have a kind of gap between the occurrence and the recreation of it.
Do you think there's a solution to this?
The solution is for people to continue to make films and to respond to the artistic urges. Unfortunately, what has been happening is that if you look at some of the films that have been commissioned by the streamers in Nigeria, they've concentrated on violence, sex, nudity.
Yeah.
And it looks like that's what people want. No, that is what is fed. And people would say most of those projects were not commissioned. Yes, they were not commissioned by those streamers. But because people are following the money, if they've bought a film that is set on the moon, all of a sudden you want to set yours in the stars, because that is what they're looking for. They're looking for interstellar projects. If they've bought a film that has a certain amount of nudity in it and it's trending, you shoot your film, you add some nudity. That people are entrepreneurs. They're responding to the market. They're following the money. So all Netflix and Amazons of this world and Paramount of this world have to do is to lead with a certain project. And everybody will follow because we are following the money. So there is a long way for us to go to be able to become independent again, which is what made Nollywood. Nollywood is that independence, and you make the story that you want to tell, irrespective of how bad the quality is. But you still sell it because, you know, that's what made Nollywood Nollywood. But gradually, that's sipping away from us. We are being dictated to. Our taste buds are being conditioned to accepting certain things. It's happening gradually. Before we know it, we've lost everything. That independence, that originality, that stubborn identity that made us the most successful fringe film industry in the world. And once it's gone forever.
Mr. Obi Emelonye, thank you very, very much for this interview. It was very enlightening.
It's midnight now.
You say it's midnight.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.